Hi, everybody. It's Marlene and Henry. And this is February 21st, 2023, better known as Fat Tuesday Mardi Gras. Okay. And this is our live stream. And I know that, for a lot of people, everybody thinks of, Mardi Gras as traditional, New Orleans, the beads, the flashing girls and guys sometimes, and even though Mardi Gras celebrated around the world, all right, it's usually associated with New Orleans, And I mean, I live in Florida, and I know Key West has a version of Mardi Gras, carnival time, time to go crazy, and actually that's what Mardi Gras is. This is Fat Tuesday. This was the day before Lent, where most of the Catholic countries or towns or cities, this is where you were supposed to give up something until Easter. So this was like the last hurrah. And of course, you know that saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, this was a kind of same mentality. This was supposedly the time of the year that you said, hey, I am going to go crazy because I've got to give up. In other words, whether you gave up something or not, it usually entailed giving something up and or going crazy at the very least. But anyway, like everything else, I really like to look at what are the origins, okay, of what these traditions, because sometimes, they get commercialized and we just see the beads and, the colors and, the craziness. And when you dig into it, there's more to it than what is recently known. As a matter of fact, people celebrate stuff and they really don't understand really what they're celebrating, in other words. So before we get into more stories of Mardi Gras, let me give you a little bit of information on what is or what are the origins of Mardi Gras. And you're going to be surprised exactly what Mardi Gras is or the origins of it. Now, it came to North America from Paris, and it's been celebrated since the Middle Ages. And in 1699, the French explorers Iberville and his men explored the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico. Now, on a spot about 60 miles south of the present location of New Orleans, they set up camp on the river's west bank, the river as in the Mississippi River. Knowing that the day March 3rd was being celebrated as a major holiday in France, they christened the site Pointe du Mardi Gras. But Mardi Gras' roots predate the French. A possible ancestor of the celebration was the Lupercalia. It's a circus-like orgy held in mid-February in Rome, and the word Lupercalia was likely derived from lupus, the Latin word for wolf. Now, the festival began at what was called the Lupercal Cave, and this was believed to have been the home of the wolf that raised Romulus and Remus, as in the founders of Rome. Now, the Luperci, which were the priests of the Lupercus, got naked and slaughtered male goats and a dog in a cave. Then they ritualistically smeared themselves with blood in the process. It sounds kind of crazy, huh? Then they skinned the goats and took a nude tour around Rome's Palatine Hill, hitting women with strips of fresh goat skin. Women who were hit with the animal skins would now be considered more fertile. This ritual might have been connected in some ways to the sexual goat god Pan, who, according to Ovid, was also celebrated during Lupercalia. And of course, Pan and everything like that. That was, of course, go crazy, have a lot of sex. And, it's tied into the fertility thing. Now, some historians think that Lupercalia had a matchmaking element for which men would draw the names of women out of a jar in a sort of sex lottery. Sometimes a couple would only stay together for the festival, but occasionally the match would lead to marriage. Let's try this on for, that's if you remember what you did, the next day. Dionysus was another god that had a celebration around this time. He was the product of a human mother and a god. And for the Canaanites, he was known as the god of rebirth. Now, during the Roman Empire, in the springtime, they had a celebration long before the birth of Jesus for Dionysus, which was known as a god of revelry, and his followers were known as revelers. Now, this ties into the Saturnalian cults or Mithric cults. Now, mysteries were popular among the Imperial Roman army from about the 1st to the 4th century AD, and Constantine was originally a believer in Mithras. Now, remember, from the 1st to the 4th century AD was when Christians, in other words, Christianity was still kind of an underground type of a religion, and you had a lot of the martyrs, and when you hear about the Christians being taken to the games and basically killed, this was around that time. Now, a weird figure often found in Mithric temples is a naked lion-headed figure, which scholars based on a decantatory inscriptions for altars as being Ahriman, a demonic figure in the Zoroastrian pantheon. Now, two serpents encircle the body. It has four wings and a scepter in its hands, and it stands on a globe inscribed with a diagonal cross. On the spring equinox, the Druids would parade about an ox and then sacrifice it and bathe in its blood to cleanse themselves or atone for their sins, which is familiar to the worship of Mithras. In the Bible, there's mention of the worship of the golden calf known as Baal. So the point being that all these religions, sometimes that you think have they're different parts of the country and even time periods within ancient civilization, BC or AD, somehow or other, they all got tied into that sacrifice, the bull, going crazy, God knows, it was, and again, this has to do with the springtime. All right. And I don't have a problem with springtime, but I think, and in some cases, some of these springtime festivals, sometimes there was ritualistic human sacrifice depending on the cult. Sometimes they were underground, sometimes they kept it down low. But yeah, when you start getting into ritualistic, that thing about the blood and the fertility and things like that and going crazy, things like that seem to go sideways sometimes, depending. You have certain people in society that, prisoners of war, undesirables, sometimes mentally ill. These would be sometimes the kind of people that would end up being sacrificed in different festivals, if you want to call them that. Now, getting back to as far as with the origins of Mardi Gras. All right. Now, here they are, the French have landed in the southern United States, or what would be the United States. And in 1704, Mobile, as in Mobile, Alabama, established a secret society called Masque de la Mobile, and it lasted until 1709. And in 1710, the Beau Society was formed and paraded from 1711 through 1861. That's about 150 years. The Promenade du Beau was a centuries-old tradition during Carnival, in which a large ox supplied by a prominent local butcher was decorated and paraded through the streets of Paris in the days leading up to Lent. The procession was held with a huge bull's head pushed along on wheels by 16 men. Later, Rex, as in Rex meaning king, would parade with an actual bull draped in white and signaling the coming Lenten meat fast. This occurred on Fat Tuesday. Ultimately, the livestock would be killed and the meat given out to the populace. So here again, we have that ritualistic sacrifice of the bull. And because, one of the things that you're supposed to, among the Catholics that you were giving up for Lent was meat. Now, in the late 1700s, this is pre-Lenten balls, okay? There were fêtes or balls that were held in New Orleans. All right, now, under French rule, mass balls flourished, but were later banned by the Spanish governors. Because remember, there was Spain at one point, believe it or not, New Orleans in that area was held by the Spanish longer than the French, all right? But they banned it. And the prohibition continued when New Orleans became an American city in 1803. Louisiana purchased, remember? But by 1823, the Creole populace prevailed upon the American governor, and balls were again permitted. 4 years later, street masking was officially made legal. Now ask yourself, why would they ban masked balls? Because it says here masked balls and or the wearing of masks. Now, most of the balls were organized by what they call crews, Krews. Now, these were private social clubs where the members remained anonymous. And during the first part of this, it was strictly males. And again, who belonged in that club, you never knew. And of course, when they made their appearances during Mardi Gras, they were masked. Now, most Mardi Gras crews today developed from private social clubs with restrictive membership policies. There are about 78 presently, as in today. And in 1985, the crew of Dionysus, here we go, was formed. This ties into the true meaning of Mardi Gras, which is a god of wine, debauchery, and inspired madness. Now, in 1872, a group of businessmen invented a king of the carnival, or the Rex, to preside over the first daytime parade. To honor the visiting Russian Grand Duke Alexei Romanov, the businessmen introduced Romanov's family colors of purple, green, and gold as the carnival's official colors. Purple stands for justice, gold for power, and green for faith. This was also the Mardi Gras season that Carnival's improbable anthem, If Ever I Cease to Love, was cemented, due in part to the Duke's fondness for the tune. So this is also where you get those colors, all right? This is why the purple green, because some people don't realize really what are the origins of the colors. This is what it is. And there's a song that's, almost like the anthem and things of this nature. Now, let's now that we've gotten that out of the way, that you realize, you might look on the face of it and think, wow, Mardi Gras is great, time to party, throw beads, drink a lot and go crazy. But you realize this is basically BC, this is all tied in. If you take that thread and you follow it back, is a springtime celebration with debauchery. Yay, right? All right. But like all things, there's always something that happens in the mix that people, for some reason, that whole debauchery drinking thing, kind of like, what can I say, leads one into, what is that, temptation? But anyway, this is the first story. I thought, this is called The Murder of Delia Harris. Now, this is 1842 New Orleans, okay? Mardi Gras revelries are going on, but this doesn't happen in New Orleans. This happens in Richmond, Virginia. And what it is there's a man named Fletcher Heath, and he has a partner named Carter Wells. Now, Carter Wells is his partner. They have a faro room, a gambling room, over a place called William Wallace. It was called William Wallace's store, remember, back in those days. But they rented the space upstairs, and they used to run like a little gambling den, mostly for faro. Now, supposedly this attack, like many times, the origin was after Wells went to the theater with Heath's mistress. Now, he went up to Wells, shot him twice behind the ear. In other words, they were in that room, comes up behind him, shoots him twice behind the ear while Carter Wells is preparing a drink. Now, the ball passed through the roof of his mouth, the balls, plural, and lodged in the outer corner of his right eye. Now, he runs out into the street crying, I'm shot, I'm shot. So he's taken to a physician's house, and the balls are taken out. I'm telling you, sometimes when that's not your day. Now, afterwards, he's taken back to his boarding house in critical condition. In other words, he lives through it. He has a couple of balls taken out of the corner of his right eye. Now, Heath, meantime, flees, and he goes to a cross street, to a house that was on the corner of Tobacco Alley and Virginia Street. Now, as you could tell, Heath Fletcher must have been upset, mad, raged, whatever. He breaks a hole in the panel of a door and crosses through it. And who lives there? It's his mistress named Delia Harris. And he attacks her with a Bowie knife. Now, she puts up her hand trying to defend herself. and he severs 3 of her fingers from her left hand and broke her right arm in 2 places. Then he hits her twice on the left side of her head, splitting it open. Okay. Now, of course, everybody's outraged because first of all, she was this, they called her, she was a pretty mulatto girl. She was the cher amie of Heath, who was a gambler by profession. And apparently he was jealous because apparently all there was that Delia and the other guy had met by coincidence at a theater. But apparently he must have sensed that something was going on with them, and he wasn't one that was going to take rejection. So what does Heath does? He escapes the cities, but police officers arrest him at a place called Jarrett's. And this was like a watering place about 30 miles from Petersburg, Virginia. He was on his way out to Texas, by the way. So 3 days later, this is February 5th, 1842, he's sitting in a jail cell. Now, this is how the newspapers describe him dressed. Remember, this guy's a professional gambler. And by the way, he's dressed like a professional gambler. He's got on gray pants, a black frock coat, black satin vest, linen bosom and collar, black satin stock and high shoes. He wore black kid gloves and a black overcoat or in a green suit out. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighed about 130 pounds. That's a very skinny guy, by the way. And he was about 25 years old. He had dark eyes and long black hair. His complexion was livid with a long face, sharp features, and cheeks sunken below prominent cheekbones. I swear to God, that to me, when I read that, it was like, this guy sounds like a vampire, a well-dressed vampire. Because if you're a man and you're 5'10" and weigh about 130 pounds, boy. So fast forward, this murder, it occurs in February. Remember, this is the olden times when you went to court right away. In April of 1842, all right, Heath is found guilty of the attempt on his friend's life of shooting Carter in the back of the head. But believe it or not, he's sentenced to only 2 years in the penitentiary. And at this time, the trial for the murder of Delia Harris is still pending. Now, a witness who testified during the trial described the evening of the murder this way. Bennett Scott, called as witness, testified that he went to the house where the prisoner and one Carter Wells lived, and there he played a game of cards with the prisoner, Wells being absent at the time. Then the prisoner shortly left off playing and went to mending a pair of pantaloons. That during this time, witness asked the prisoner where Wells was, and the prisoner as in being Heath, said he had gone to the theater. That the prisoner then said to the witness, quote, "Do you know that I would kill 2 persons this night if I came across them? If I had had half a pint of brandy, I would have done what I intended to do at Bradley's, and it would have been all over with them." End quote. That the prisoner had been seen talking to Carter Wells and Delia Harris and said they had been together at Bradley's that evening. He said that Wells and himself had rode out together that evening and stopped at Bradley's, where Delia Harris then was. That the prisoner said he would not mind killing any person, that he had once before shot a woman at a ball in Petersburg and shot a man in a bar room. That the witness on the same evening before his conversation between himself and the prisoner had seen Delia Harris and Martha Gilliam going to the theater and had mentioned this to the prisoner, which he supposed was the reason why he came to speak of Delia Harris. Okay. Next, the attorney called Carter Wells as witness. He testified that Heath had told him to tell Delia Harris she must not let him in if he came there the next day, because he would kill her if she did. All right. Bradley's, I'm not sure what that is, but I'm imagining it must have been either some type of hotel or saloon or something. So he's, according to him, whether it was true or not, he had already shot a woman at a ball in Petersburg. This was like on the outskirts of Richmond. He had shot a man in a bar room. Talk about premeditation. He's talking about, if I had a little bit more brandy to drink, I'm going to shoot. I would have shot them right then and there. All right. And so basically he's working himself up to it. Now, Fletcher Heath doesn't go to trial for the murder of Delia Harris till November of 1842. Now, he's found guilty of murder in the first degree after the jury deliberated only 30 minutes, and he was sentenced to hang on December 23rd. Then he was granted a new trial. Because remember, all these whenever, even back then, whenever you were sentenced to death, you automatically got an appeal. Now, in September of 1843, okay, almost a year later, while he's waiting for this new trial, he escapes from the jail at Henrico County. Now, $100 reward was posted for his capture. He and two other prisoners had cut locks and chains and dug a hole in the walls of the jail. The last clue given of his whereabouts was in October of 1843, where he was believed to have booked passage to New York from Norfolk, Virginia. Now, Carter Wells, he dies 8 years later in 1850, 8 years after the shooting, and he was not an older man. Apparently, he didn't die at that time, but he was in his 20s when he got shot. So he died when he was in his 30s. So there must have been some type of effect from that shooting. Now, fast forward to 1895. We're talking almost 50 years into the future. The newspaper, the Richmond Dispatch, recollects this crime. Remember, this was an unsolved, well, it was solved, but he escaped and he was never recaptured. And it was reported that it was believed that Heath escaped with the help of his family, who lived in Petersburg and were well-to-do people. They say he lived a long time in Florida and then went to California from New Orleans. Now, a resident of Virginia who lived in San Francisco in the fall of 1892 said he saw Fletcher Heath dealing faro in the Bella Union Saloon many years before. In other words, this guy got out, had family who gave him a hand at Petersburg, and he escaped. And remember, this is the middle of the 1800s. Goes to Florida, goes all over the place, but nobody's really looking for him that hard. And they even recognize him, but in other words, he got away. And who knows who else he killed along the way. So, yeah, there you go. That's our first Mardi Gras story there, even though that happened in Richmond, Virginia. And, okay, it's your turn, Wingman. You told me that because we were talking about old houses and things like that. And the reason why this conversation came up is, when you go to New York, when you talk about New Orleans and scary houses, God, there's a million stories about haunted houses. And I've spoken to even tour guides out of New Orleans. And a lot of them have told me that a lot of the hauntings are kind of like either not made up, but they're exaggerated, or they said, look, if there was anything there once, it's not there anymore. So I said, and he says, well, you know what? I have a story about something that happened with, what was it? That somebody that you knew that bought an old house.
Which one do you want to know?
The one that you told me about, the guy that bought the old mansion.
I have a friend. It was a friend of a friend of mine. Bought a mansion in England, where the Trump had the casino in
Atlantic City.
In Atlantic City, and it was built in the 1800s, so the thing looked ginormous. But the thing about it, back then they made everything elaborate, so right. It's like it from the outside it looked like it had 300 rooms, but not
right.
Really.
Okay.
When you walked inside, like the bedrooms were huge.
Okay.
But I guess the guy who was making it was drinking at the time.
Okay.
Because now, present time, each room would have had a bathroom.
Right. Okay.
You had to go downstairs to the back of the house to go to the bathroom, and it had 3 floors. So good luck getting to the bathroom by the time you got to the bathroom.
Yeah, people don't realize that those old houses, there was all the bathrooms were on the ground floor.
Yeah. So, our friend said, "Look, we need you guys to stay and give us the thumbs up. What did you think of it?" Because he goes, "I'm going to do a couple of renovations. I'm going to put central AC and all this stuff. But in the meantime, it's winter time, so you got to worry about that." So he said, "Just stay there. We have a stock fridge. Just stay the weekend and let me know what you think." So I went with my buddy and his son. We said, "Okay, not a problem. We didn't have anything to do at the time, so we said, okay." He paid our gas. He gave us food. Thumbs up. So we went there. We were looking around, and then they had the back then version of of a widescreen TV, which weighed like 300 pounds.
Yeah, I remember those.
And I said, okay, that's free too. So he had HBO and all that nonsense on the TV. So he had a big couch that came from the previous owner. He said, look, the couch is clean. We had it shampooed, so don't start complaining. So we said, okay. We were there, and I went to the kitchen to get food. And his son said, look, Henry, I'm gonna go to this retarded bathroom.
Because this originally was what you said was like a house, an old mansion
Yeah, it
kind
was
of
a
deal.
mansion.
Right. Okay.
It was like very, very, very wealthy people
okay.
lived there. And at the time when they had the horse-drawn carriages and everything,
Right.
Atlantic City was the place to go.
Right. Yes.
People would go to the beach. People would go everything, and it was gorgeous.
Right.
We saw pictures of it. They had on the wall. The place was amazing. You know.
So anyway, your friend is.
So we went to the kitchen, and we were like making ourselves cold fried chicken and everything, and he was still in the bathroom. So I look and I see something go across the way, like a shadow,
like from across the doorway.
Like the kitchen was here, and there was a door, and then a hallway that you turn and you go to this circled staircase.
Right.
Going to the second floor, and then it circled again, and they went to the third floor. They had a little circle that went to the attic.
Okay.
I mean, the thing was like top notch. It was like they threw everything out, and it was all polished wood and white with crown moldings all the way around.
Okay.
Well, my friend was gonna get rid of all that anyway. Okay. And I see him go across the thing, and I started screaming. I go, "Stop playing around!" And he's like, "Henry, I'm still in the bathroom." And my friend Vincent was sitting in the living room trying to figure out HBO. And I go, he goes, "Where's my food?" And I go, "I'm in the kitchen getting it. You guys need to stop playing around." He goes, "We're here. It's only the three of us." And then
because you're thinking, okay, who was it that crossed?
We started freaking out because since he had the place empty, we thought he might have been a homeless.
Oh, okay, because it was empty. That's right. He was going to do the renovations. Okay.
Yeah, so the thing about it is, the renovation was going to be the following week.
Okay.
So he told us to let him know what we thought of it, see any changes that we could recommend.
Okay.
Because my friend's brother was a contractor.
Okay.
So he said, okay, you guys, he left us a pad and pens. You guys make notes on each room and tack it to the wall. What do you think will be good? Because I want to get my money's worth.
Okay.
We said, okay. So he had left a pad in the kitchen. And when I saw that thing running across the thing, I said, I wrote creepy house.
But what was it? Just like a human, like
it was like a outline of a shadow. Like in other words, you stand in front of the light and it just reflects into the hallway.
Okay.
So I said, okay. And then second time, I said, no, the heck with this. I went to check and I was mad. I was about to throw the food in the garbage. And I went to the hallway and I see the outline. Okay. And it was like two people walking upstairs. And I swear to God, I screamed. And I started calling my friend. I go, "What the effing hell? Is somebody here? Get the bat." I go, "There's nobody here, moron. It's just us." I go, and I told him what it was. And then he started laughing. You didn't know this house was haunted?
You're like, obviously not.
He goes, no. You know, Charlie would not have what if he said that, you or Carmine would not have come. And I said,
so in other words, he only told one of them, right?
He only told the dad because the dad didn't care. He didn't believe in any of that stuff.
Okay.
So when I told him, and I said, okay, wait for it. But it was like 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 you have a VHS when they had the
Right.
VHS and you put it in a loop.
Yes.
The people didn't seem like they were bad people.
Right.
Okay, what it looked like there was somebody coming to stay there on the trip.
Okay.
So they would just every day for 3 days was the same thing, like on a loop. They would come in. They would they were dressed in period clothes, really high end period clothes, and they had this carpet bag,
Okay.
and they would just be walking up the stairs. Didn't look at us. Didn't look at anything else. Just straight up the stairs.
And were they were they like see through, or did they have any color
They,
to
they,
them?
they had there was like something like you're looking at like a black and white picture,
Okay.
and she was dressed in lace and like in other words, like if you shopped at Armani,
Okay.
very high end with pearls, the whole nine, and you could see the outline of her face. She didn't look like something out of a Stephen King movie. She
Okay.
looked like really pretty, but like
Totally oblivious to you guys.
yeah, like no, because they were not looking for us.
Right. No, no, no. But I'm saying because
And she was dressed like she had like in other words like the deep red. If you will see it, it will look like something like really caked on, and the little hat with the lace and the flower and everything.
so did and it was what at the same time every day that you guys saw them?
About the same time every day, and I had proved it to them. So I snatched them. They were stay in the kitchen, but stay in the kitchen. If I see it, you better see it.
So what
It-
happened? They would just go up the stairs?
They would just go like they were going to their room, like in other words, like every day they'll be going up the stairs to go to their room, and you wouldn't see them only in the evening. It looks
So
like that, like they must have died at night.
okay, so do you think that they were like people that lived there or guests?
Yes,
They were okay, so in other words, it was from the time by the time it had already been turned into some type of hotel.
yeah.
Okay.
Or it could have been the owners. We don't know because they never told my friend because
Okay.
he didn't know it had enough information, and the realtor never told him because he didn't know.
Oh, because what
He
was
already
it?
went like 3 different hands,
Right. In other words.
but so all he knew was bits and pieces.
And what was it? It was what, empty all this time or what?
Like in other words, they flipped it like 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
Because of the fact that the house didn't it had substandard
Oh,
electrical.
I see.
It didn't have no AC. It didn't have anything. The summertime, for what I heard, that thing was like an oven.
So in other words, whoever bought it, they had to invest a lot of money to
my
make it work.
My friend didn't have deep pockets, but he had enough, and he was thinking in the future
Right.
because of the fact that Trump had the casinos
Right.
and people will stay there to go gambling.
Right. So he's thinking, I'm going to get some of his guests, and even if they walk over there to gamble.
So his place was maybe like not even half a block from Trump's casino.
Okay. So in other words, okay.
It was right in the center, like right in the center of the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it had like maybe like a third of an acre behind the property.
Right.
So it had like
So what happened?
They're virgin of garages, but it was out away from the house.
So what happened? He ended up doing the renovations.
No. He did the renovations, but he was smart. He rented it as a haunted.
Oh, he threw the haunted in there.
Yeah, and people will stay to see if they saw something.
Yes, exactly.
So he made a killing.
Right. And that was very because back in those years, a lot of some people did cash in on
You know
the
why?
haunted thing, but
you know why? Because of The Exorcist, and because of all those types of movies that came out that time, people wanted to see if it was real.
yeah.
So after I showed my friends that, he goes, "When are we leaving?"
Oh, now that everybody was ready to leave.
No. See, because my friend Vincent didn't believe in any of that stuff. He thought it was all like BS.
Mm-hmm.
When I showed it to him,
Everything changed.
he looked at his watches. When are we leaving?
Right. That's usually the way it works.
So
That's usually the way it works. You know.
we never went back, so we don't know what he did with it.
And you know what? You'll get among any paranormal investigations, they might even call it a residual haunting, which is exactly like what he's describing, which is like on a loop. Like they're same time, same trajectory,
And we were surprised because so many people stay there
right?
that there was nobody else.
Okay. Had been empty for a bit before he took it over.
It was empty for about 6, 7 years.
Okay.
They couldn't sell it. They couldn't give it away.
There you go. Yeah.
That's how come he got it for a song.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's yeah. And along came the
No,
ghost.
because he said if I had to pay what this place is actually really worth,
right.
it would be impossible for me to.
Yeah. But it was whoever bought it knew that they were going to have to spend X amount of money to bring it and make it.
Yeah, all the wire, everything had to be changed.
See. Oh, there you go. And there's your haunted mansion story. And you know what? Is it a residual haunting? Some people say, yeah, that's residual when you don't have any interaction. It's the same time. And then there's others that say that even ghosts sometimes will get trapped in a loop, which is kind of horrible if you think about it, where they keep redoing that moment. And it could be, remember, back in those years, a lot of people, that the lights were gas. Everything was gas in these older houses as far as the lighting. Sometimes people would die because they didn't realize that they had a gas leak or that the thing, and they would go into their rooms and the windows were closed or whatever, and they would basically die in their sleep, unaware that they had a gas leak.
By the time that he got it, that it would. I don't know if you remember the wiring. There was like cloth.
Yes.
And the switches were like a little circle, and you could actually pop the thing out, and it had the wires exposed.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about from the time that you're describing what these people look like, the couple.
Yeah, back then, yeah, but they upgraded slightly over the
but what
years.
I'm
But
saying
not,
is that maybe the reason why they were haunting was because you think of yourself, why would maybe this was their last walk in life? Maybe they had come there and were going up. This was like their last thing, not realizing that maybe they were going to lose their lives because, and this is just me making stuff up, but I do know that in those times, because of the gas being used for lighting, and people being unaware that they had a gas leak, you would have people, that families die because of gas leaks. So that's just me thinking, why are they stuck on that little hamster wheel of going up the stairs, with their carpet bag kind of deal? And maybe this was actually the last thing they did in life, assuming. But there you go. Anyway, another thing that happened, we're going to go back to the Mardi Gras, all right? And again, Mardi Gras, this is something that I think is fascinating, because if we think about this happening now, it'd be like, but this was back in the mid even the late 1700s. People used to fight duels. And even though it was outlawed in many cities and countries, depending on the reason supposedly the offense was given, people either got a slap on the wrist or something like that. And this is what happened. Now, this is June of 1842. All right. And this happened in France. Now, they're reporting in June, but it actually happened in February 8th of 1842, which was Mardi Gras. And it reads how some ladies at the Fosse and the Arrigay were grossly insulted in the streets during the evening by a man in a mask and domino. On the following day, the disgraceful conduct, and I'm quoting here, having been attributed to a young man named Seguela, a Monsieur Vignis, part of whose family had suffered from it, accosted Seguela, and after some severe language, struck him on the face. A challenge was given, but from some obstacles, the meeting could not take place before March 5th, when Seguela received his adversary's ball in the head, and after lingering 11 days in great agony, expired. Monsieur Vignis and the 4 seconds were prosecuted and brought to trial at Foix on the 24th. They were all acquitted on the criminal charge, but the court decreed that Vignis and his 2 seconds should pay 3,000 francs as damages to the family of Seguela. Talk about losing your life over what? Okay, here comes this young guy named Seguela. It's Mardi Gras. He's probably had too much to drink. grossly insults these ladies in the streets, which apparently are part of Monsieur Vigny's family or whatever. Okay, they suffered for it. And he gives them some severe language, then strikes him on the face. This is the stereotypical that you've seen of the duel, you've insulted me, you've hit the guy in the face. A challenge is given. But not till March 5th, almost a month later, they meet. And then this guy shoots him in the head. And he lingers 11 days and then he dies. Now, the 4 seconds, when everybody says, remember, each guy that goes to the duel has 2 seconds. This is somebody that's going to stand in for you and help you save face if for some reason you can't. All right? All of them are prosecuted. But then the only ones that really are punished are Monsieur Vigny's and his 2. And all they're told is pay 3,000 francs to the family of Seguela. Talk about. Now, let's fast forward 3 years. This is the eve of Mardi Gras, February 6, 1845. All right. And this is in New Orleans. There's a gentleman named H.F. Hatch. Later on, I find that H stands for Hiram, but H.F. Hatch, they call it, has a misunderstanding with a young man named William Augustus Jackson. He's 27 years old. Jackson is from New York. And people don't realize that in New Orleans, even in those years, there was like people from the north, like Yankees. Remember, this is pre-Civil War. This is not like you could say the Civil War. There was always some kind of like friction there. So here they've all gathered. Apparently, they're at the St. Louis Ballroom. And these 2 guys have some type of misunderstanding inside the hat room. They exchange blows. Now, Hatch leaves and comes back 15 minutes later with a knife, a dirk, and stabs Jackson several times. Okay, forget the duel part. He just out and out comes back. Now, this guy Jackson, his own uncle was a judge. And apparently the argument was over some type of insult that was received in the ballroom when they were dancing. Now, the mayor who's attending this ball, all right, he arrests Hatch. Now, this is February 6th. Fast forward 2 months, April 7th, 1845. Believe it or not, Hatch is found not guilty. All right. And apparently the incident that started all of this is that Jackson, the 27-year-old, had stepped on Hatch's toes. All right. Remember, everybody's dancing. Hatch asks him his name, and Jackson replies, "Sir, I'm a gentleman. My name is Jackson. I'm a nephew of Judge Jackson and staying at the St. Charles Hotel." And from there, it all went downhill. And this 27-year-old got knifed to death. The guy that does it is found not guilty. And that was that. So, yeah. Now, the next thing, which I found really interesting was, and I had never heard of this, was everybody's heard of the Casquet girls. Now, the Casquet girls are supposed to be in other words, the origins of many of the families. This was when New Orleans was being set up. That supposedly they sent over some girls from France. And I was unaware that supposedly there was a vampire story connected to these girls. All right. Now, the origins this is again, Louisiana, early days. French population, it's all men. Okay. Now, of course, because they're sending them out there. This is, remember, the Louisiana, all that area, Alabama, all that coastline. They're sending out their fur traders, men, just to settle the area. All right. And it was just it was just considered too dangerous for women and children to be out there. So fast forward 1699. Back then, the population consists of 82 men and boys, 13 of whom listed their occupation as buccaneer. Okay. Now, most of the men were what they call coureurs de bois, or runners of the woods. And what they did was they were fur traders. They traded furs with the Indians. Then in 1704, the governor, which is Sieur de Bienville, he's becoming concerned that these runners of the woods, the coureurs de bois, are losing their Christianity by spending so much time with the Indians and marrying Indian women. Like, what does he expect? He's also worried about their loyalty. He's thinking, if we have a war with the Indians, whose side are they going to fight on? Remember, they're marrying Indian women, they're having children with these women. So Bienville is thinking, we need to bring good Christian women to Louisiana for these men to marry. Thus, he asked for what they call filles à la cassette, which in English translates to the casket girls. And this was the name given to these French girls who were sent to the colonies in the New World. And these girls were supposed to serve as the basis for the establishment of colonist families, right? Now, later on, it became like a matter of pride on the Gulf Coast to show that you were descended from one of these girls. Now, the first Casquet girls, they reached Mobile, Alabama in 1704. Then they send over, 15 years later, they send another bunch of them to Biloxi, Mississippi. And then another bunch of them in 9 years later, 1728, they send other ones to New Orleans. Eventually, throughout the years, over 700 Casquet girls are brought to the New World from France. Again, remember, this is the time of marriages and if you're legitimate, illegitimate children, and all these guys are worried is like, hey, we want. In other words, we've conquered more or less now we need to set up civilized society. Now, prior to these girls being sent out there, this was another problem. The women that were supplied to the colonists they went through the Paris streets and they took all the undesirables. Basically, they emptied out the houses of correction. These included prostitutes who back then would be branded on their face with a fleur-de-lis. All right. So that's another thing. Even if they had sent French women, it just wasn't just any French woman. It was like, yeah, they're emptying out their jails, their undesirables, and they were shipping them out there. And they're like, no, it's not going to work. So the Bishop of Quebec, remember, France is also going in there to Canada, on order of the French king, carefully selects all these girls for their reputation, their age, very young, of course, and pure values, so that, quote, they could contribute positively to the quality of the community. Now, these girls were recruited from orphanages, convents, and although they were poor, they were guaranteed to be virgins. Now, the Ursuline nuns, remember, we're talking now the ones that went to New Orleans, all right? In 1727, the Ursuline nuns had just arrived from Rouen, France, and they were told, chaperone these girls until they get married. Now, these girls were like 16 or younger, and back then, the law permitted a girl to get married as early as 12 years old. Now, of course, the reason why they're called the filles à la cassette is because they carried these little trunks overseas from France, which contained their belongings. A lot of people think of the casket like as in a bigger box. No, this was something that each one could just carry. It was a small box. Now, there was 88 girls that were sent to New Orleans. Now, the records indicate that all found husbands, even ones who, quote, look more like a soldier on guard duty than like a young lady, which means everybody got a husband. Okay. These Ursuline nuns is like, okay, everybody got a husband. Now, later on, and I'm not sure where this started, there were rumors saying that some of the girls were vampires and that the third floor of the convent where they stayed was haunted by them. So much so that the doors and the windows of the convent were bolted shut by nails that were blessed by the Pope. Now, there's another story, which I haven't found reference to it, was that back in 1978, two paranormal, either investigators or reporters, camped out in front of the old Ursuline convent, which is at 1112 Chartres Street, hoping to see some type of, I don't know, vampires return. I don't know what they were looking for. Story goes that they're found dead and insanguinated, as in no blood left. And supposedly the crime has never been solved. I did not find reference to that murder. And you would think something like that would have made the news. Now, the problem with this story is this: these girls come over in 1728, but the nuns did not complete their convent until 1752. Okay, so I don't know what third floor convent they're talking about. So that story is not accurate. And the so called caskets were the size of small pieces of luggage where each girl carried their personal belongings. And there's no report of murders of investigators or reporters as described, because part of the story was that supposedly in the caskets, and I think this is somebody thinking a casket like as in a full size casket, there were vampires in there. Or in other words, that they brought vampires with them, something like that. That the vampire said, hey, we're going to hitch a ride with the casket girls into the new world. Now, let's talk about the ghosts of the Ursuline convent. This right here is much more believable. There were supposedly workers that were doing construction and restoring it. And they were shocked by what they found, because inside the walls, they found countless bones all along the outer areas and even underneath the foundation of the wall. Now, they bring the remains to a lab for testing, and they're hoping that they belong to animals, which I doubt, but that was not the case. Now, the lab results come back, and it's discovered that the bones actually belong to children and infants. Knowing that the Ursuline nuns, they also ran an orphanage. It was just wasn't the convent on the grounds. It's possible that these were the victims of infant mortality or disease. Yellow fever epidemics occurred almost every single summer in New Orleans. All right. And as a matter of fact, there was a very serious in 1853. They had 40% of their population contracted yellow fever, and 10% of those died. And of course, the very young and the old were the most likely victims, but of course, anybody could catch it. I mean, as far as killing, I mean, you could survive yellow fever, but those were mostly the ones that died. Now, in the midst of these epidemics, of course, thousands of people lost their lives. And perhaps the nuns, and this was another problem when you had all these mass people dying all at once. Okay, there's the morgues, the cemeteries, everybody that handles the deaths are they can't handle the traffic, and they themselves sometimes are taking, either they're sick themselves or they're taking care of their own family members. So what happens is all the people that would normally come in to take the dead and then bury it, those services are non-existent, which leads one to believe maybe this is why the nuns buried these children there. Now, it's difficult to say now how the bones came to be placed in the walls. And it comes, of course, as no surprise that the spirits of these children who once lived or were educated at the convent still haunt the property. There's reports of children's laughter coming from the front garden of the convent, even in the dead of night. And the museum closes at night, and there's no children on the grounds because now there's a museum there. And there's locals where from the surrounding buildings have heard or seen some children peeking into the gardens of the convent, and looks like small childlike apparitions playing right in front of the lawn. In other words, people in the area come over there to take a look and see what they see, and hoping to see it, and all they do is they hear the kids, which is kind of creepy, but that makes sense. So there you go. And let's, I'm not surprised that that of all the stories, that's the one that I believe is very plausible. Now, you had a great story, Henry, which is this is
the club story.
The club story.
Okay. Back in the day, I used to play a lot of the clubs. I used to DJ and run a lot of the major clubs in New York. But I also have friends that play in other clubs, and we used to go there to like help them out, like give them a hand,
Right.
and just be there to give them, support.
Right.
And a lot of it hasn't changed. The real estate, even back then, was untouchable. So you will find something within a reasonable price, you would jump on it, even if you had to fight the rats to open the door.
Okay.
Um, People complain now paying $2,000 for a studio. Please, that hasn't changed. So our friend found a place in East Village.
Okay.
There was 100,000 square foot. The guy wasn't able to rent it for about 6-7 years. Um, through another person, we found that out because he didn't want to put it out that he couldn't rent it because afraid of people going in there and ripping it apart.
Right.
So it didn't have no for sale sign. It didn't have anything on there. So we kind of like slipped through the cracks.
Okay.
So we didn't want to. He didn't want to rent 100,000 square foot. All he wanted to rent enough to open up his club.
Okay.
So he made a deal with the owner that he would give him a break on the price. He could turn it into a club any way he wanted, but with the conditions that at least once a week he would do a walkthrough on the property and inside the building to make sure there was no homeless or no looters or anything like that, because he was afraid they would rip out the pipes, the
Okay.
copper pipes, the electrical, and then if you ever wanted to sell it, it will become unsellable.
All right.
Okay, so this is a little bit. I will go back. Years later, that building got condemned.
Okay.
So they were using the building, a lot of people, to do raves.
Okay, but this is before that. This is
This
what you're
came this
the
came
story.
this came like much later after. I will come. I'm coming back.
Right.
to
So,
that.
but your story is before the raves and all that other
Yes,
stuff.
yes.
All
Okay.
right.
So
Okay.
this is what happened to the building after.
Okay.
But when we were there, he let them fix up the place and make it nice.
Okay.
So we closed off a lot of the doors that connected to the building.
Right.
So he was able to calculate that he will have about 100, about 50, no, about 500 people.
Okay.
About 500 people, including the DJ booth and everything else.
Right.
So we were happy with that. We would be able to decorate it anywhere we want. We were happy with that. So everything was good. We did the grand opening,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fantastic. We we had a big turnout because he was well known.
Okay.
So everybody was happy. Come second week, we started hearing noise, and he started getting wigged out because we had a lot of equipment in there.
Okay.
So he's like, "Oh shit!" So we started walking around, and we didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything. I said, "Okay." Then Saturday, when we
So but what was it? He was what, having the club there, what, on the weekends only, or what?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
So Friday, since it was a grand opening, he had to get into his head into the game.
Okay.
So he didn't want to think about that. He said, if there's anybody in there, we'll deal with it on the weekend. So everything was good. The grand opening was a success. Come Saturday we started hearing even louder, like bam, 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 and a noise in the hallway. So we had cops there with us.
Right.
So that we asked Tom the cop to go check it out.
What were they, like off-duty cops? You
Yeah.
mean? Okay.
So we asked Tom the cop to go check it out. Gave him the keys. He opened up the divider door and he went inside. He goes, "You guys haven't seen anything in here. I don't know what to tell you." He said, "Okay." Sunday we heard it again. We told him go do complete walkthrough. So he did, and then he found some bones on the ground, and he found chicken bones, and then he found goat head in a pot.
Jeez, that's not good.
And so
boy.
So we didn't want to touch it. So that day we had a Haitian cop with us, Benny, and Benny was a good guy. Benny followed us everywhere. He said he was like our puppy. Everywhere we went, we had Benny.
Okay.
Because he was reliable. So we went and showed him. He goes, "Oh shit, man, this is not good. This is bad juju. Do not touch it." I said, "Why?" I said, "My mom was a spiritualist, dude. I don't care." He goes, "This is not that. This is bad juju. You don't know what's attached to this." So we got rid of it. Okay, we come, we go back, do all our stuff, close up the place. We come back. We found more stuff and bones everywhere.
But how were they getting in there?
We found that out. All the doors were locked, but they pried it open with a crowbar.
Ah, okay.
They pried it open with a crowbar, and they really tore the door up. So we told the owner, and the owner said, "Look, take some money out of the rent you're gonna pay me, put a deadbolt, and lock it up." Okay. He said, "Okay, cool." So we did that, and then we found notes telling us that stuff's gonna happen.
But where did they leave?
They were leaving the notes on the door.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so you guys are going in there. All you do. So basically, what you're telling me is you're hearing noises. You guys go in there. You don't find people, but you're finding.
Yeah.
I guess what they were having ceremonies or something in there.
Yeah. So we went. So we didn't think anything of it because we locked the door.
Okay.
But then we were still hearing it again. So
after the padlock.
Yeah. So now we had them go in there, and then we went with them. And it was more stuff. They had animal parts, and then he found a decomposing hand in the corner.
See, that's
and
oh boy.
He started looking around, and we told him, check out everything. Check out the closet. Check out everything. And he found a human head in the closet.
Okay, that must have been the end of that.
So,
oh Jesus Christ! See, but I think it's bad enough that if they're sacrificing animals or whatever, chickens or whatever,
it gets better. So we were like, "What the f in hell? How are they getting in?" So we started looking around. Since that building was so big, a lot of the stuff was decomposing the floors and everything because he had water damage on the roof. So they got into one of the windows.
Oh, so after the padlock, they started using the window.
Yeah. So we told the owner, and he said, "Look, cage up the windows and everything." So the cop knew a contractor.
Okay.
So he said, "Look, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but I guarantee you they will not be able to get in anymore." So they were getting into the first floor.
Right.
So they caged up all the windows on the first floor. Okay. Unless there was Spider-Man, they were not going to get in.
Okay.
So we caged up all the whole windows and everything. Everything was good.
All right.
Now we started seeing stuff in the hallway.
Okay, but wait. Let me ask you something. They left you notes that something was going to happen, like what, threatening you guys?
Like they were going to come after us, and they were going to kill us.
Like actual, not like I'm going to put a spell on you. It's going to be like we're going to hurt you.
No, they said we're going to put a spell on us, and they were going to kill us.
Okay, that's a problem.
Okay, so we told my friend, the cop, Benny, to check it out. He said, "Look, check it out, and what do you think this is?" And he goes, "This is they're doing juju. They're doing
voodoo stuff.
Yeah, they're doing voodoo on somebody." And then he started looking. He goes, "Oh shit, man! This is Haitian mob. This is Haitian mob." He goes, "They don't do people that do regular voodoo. Do not do this. Somebody hired them to do this."
Okay, so
he said, "Look, you guys need to actually be careful." He goes, "You need to actually get more cops here, and you will be okay." I said, "Okay, all right, not a problem." So we looked in his budget, and he said, "Look, we're making really good money. We'll get more cops, but let's wait a bit, okay? And because we have a big event,
okay.
If we make good money in this event, we could cover all that." So I said, "Okay." We started putting the lights for this huge event that he was having, like a holiday thing. and we put in the lights, and then we see like a shadow at the end, and it looked like it was something with a ghost head.
With a goat's head?
Yeah, and it had like slashes in the face and white paint and blood coming out.
Who saw this? You or who
Huh?
else?
No, one of the guys that my friend had working with him, because he always brought like 2 or 3 people to help him carry
Right.
the record crates and everything,
Okay.
and he would pay them. So they were putting on the lights and everything in the hallway, and he came in screaming,
I bet. I'd be screaming too.
and he told me that, and then Benny went out. We saw Benny. This is your department. Go look outside. And he went there and looked. He waited a couple of minutes, and then he saw it. He goes, "Oh shit, man, this is not good. This is not good." He started shaking. He was like sweating, and he almost threw up. He goes, "This is not good. You're not gonna get rid of this." He goes, "My wife's mother is a voodoo priest."
Like, okay, like a priestess?
Yeah. He was I mean, she's sought after all over New York. If anybody could do this, she'll do this. It's gonna cost you money, but after she does it, you will not have any problem ever again. So he had her come down and check it out, and she nodded her head like she looked like 3 shades of white, and she goes, "I'll take care of it." And she was there for about 2 or 3 hours.
But let me ask you, what did she say? I mean, in
She
other
said she
words,
said that this is not like ghosts. This is demon stuff.
okay,
She
okay,
says this is like this what they summon here is bad. Like bad, it could mess your life up for good bad.
okay,
She goes, don't worry, I will get rid of it. So in the meantime, so they could finish the event, she salted up and she marked up the floor of the area and closed up the whole area and
okay,
everything, and she's standing there by herself, and we locked her butt in there.
okay, okay. Jeez.
Oh no, I said, look, hey,
Even
look.
Benny, you telling me Benny didn't go in with his mother-in-law? She was on her own?
No, I said, look, man, you might not, you might be one mother-in-law short, but that's on you. And he started laughing. He goes, no, man, that those things don't have a chance. She's been doing this for over 30 years. Believe me, if anybody could do it, it's her. She was in there, and I heard her screaming and everything, and then we were kicking the door. I said, shut up! And we heard her getting thrown across the room.
Whoa, 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 wait. How did that? What? What she told? I take it she told you. What she told you later, or how did?
No,
How
no,
would you guys know?
because the building where the club was divided
Okay,
by doors, but like that fat,
okay.
and like those pocket doors,
Mm-hmm.
but they had a handle on the side that when you pulled it down, the door sunk into the floor and it sunk on the side. And then you just went this way and just put a lock on each side, and not
Mm-hmm.
even the Hulk will get through that door. That
Okay.
each door weighed like 300 pounds. So we locked it in, and and the other side of that was the rest of the building.
Okay.
It was like a hallway, and it looks like they must have had like all offices or anything. We never asked, so we pulled it together and we locked it in place. So we,
So,
we were listening to her getting thrown in there and everything, and
but didn't you guys like nobody ran in there to help this poor woman or what? God, didn't you think what if
not because I think about it. She said not to open the door because whatever she's doing in there, go get in.
okay, so she already told you guys whatever you hear, don't come in here?
Don't come in. So we let her in there.
Okay.
She threw up. She threw up. Blood came out of her nose and her mouth because we saw it where she landed, but she got rid of it. Um,
And what did she say it was? Was it
she
was
said
it
it was demon, something demon, demon of demon origin, and she said that whatever they do, this part of the building is dead to them because
okay.
it's going to have residual um like stuff around.
Okay.
So even though she got rid of it,
Mm-hmm.
it could have traces of something in there because of the blood and all the stuff that they did. It could be something left around there.
Okay.
So then we did a huge event with over 1,000 people. We opened up the other side of the building,
Okay.
and we opened up an extra part and added it onto this. So we had over 1,000 people, and a couple of the workers and the bartender heard like stuff in the hallway, but nothing on this on the side where they were. Like they heard stuff in there and everything,
Right.
but they didn't pay any attention to it. Um, and he got his money's worth. He did like 3 or 4 more shows, and after a while, they got used to the noise. And unfortunately,
But what
the
was making the noise wasn't live people. It was whatever she had
the
dealt with.
was left in there
Okay.
after she left. They like she said it will. We might end up hearing stuff
But
because of the blood and the rituals they did.
let me ask you, so I have to. You said that they found a human hand and a head. What did they do with that stuff?
Okay, sorry, I forgot that part. The cops wanted
I
to
mean, let's face it, you don't find that every day.
the cop wanted to call the cops.
Right, of course.
We told them that we couldn't call the cops. My friend invested his life savings in there, over $20,000. He said that if the cops came, they would shut him down and he will be broke. He will be homeless because out of that he was paying his apartment, paying all his bills. So he said, "Look, just cut me a break and just let it go." So he got it. He understood. So what he did was said, "Look, I'm gonna call a friend of mine that's that works in a funeral home,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll
Okay.
burn it. No harm, no foul. But this cannot happen again. Okay, so I cannot do this again because I could lose my job.
Right. In other words, if we find any more human body parts, that's it.
No, it says but if by accident or intentionally
Right.
you find anything that they left behind, I'm
That's
gonna
it.
have to write it."
Of course.
So he, we said thank you. Everything was good. So he did his shows, he did all his stuff, and he even the cop was scared to come in there after that.
I bet. Jeez. But let me
He
tell you.
stayed next to the DJ booth until the last show. He did about a year's worth, and then like they started having. We don't know if it's part of that or what. They had started having electrical problems
Right.
and leaks that they were happy for. The lights were going messed up. So unfortunately, the guy, he said it would cost more to have that place up to code
Right.
than having a little DJ club for a short period of time. So what they ended up doing was bulldozing that place. So, but since
But
my
let me
friend,
ask you something. But this was because you told me later on that that building was used as a rave club, or what happened? Did they?
no, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, that's right. What I said at the beginning, they before there's people squatters. What they did was they says that's what raves are. People
So, but
going
what happened to
into
this?
empty buildings, and unknown to the owner,
Right. They just.
they do raves. So a couple of kids from the area were doing raves. They were coming in through the basement. They must be out of
So
their
let me
mind.
ask you something. So what did he do? Did when he started having all those electrical problems, what he left, or what did he do?
Well, he told the kids, my friends,
Uh huh.
said, "Look, you guys help me out. So can you? Do you guys want a better spot?" And my friend looked at him like he was retarded. He goes, "What do you think?" So he said, "Look, I got another building. It's only 5 years old."
Ah, okay.
He goes, "I'm too old to be dealing with this stuff.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and I'm going to be moving out of town." you guys could have the building, take care of it, and if you guys want to buy it down the line, I'll give you
I'm
first
sorry,
crack
guys.
on it.
That's my dog.
I'll give you first crack on it.
Hey, Jin, cut it out.
So by the time that my friend left the building, we didn't realize that he was like hoarding all the money that he was making there.
Okay.
And living in his mom's house.
Okay, so he was able to do well
so
afterwards.
What he did was he outright bought the building.
The second one.
Yeah,
okay.
He outright bought the building, and we didn't realize that the building on the far side of the building
right
was unused. So what he did, he fixed it up, and he rented it out for office space.
Okay.
And then the right side, he used it for the club.
Okay.
So it was funny because the people from the office were going into the club.
Why not? So what happened? So this place basically, and believe it or not, I'm thinking from the point of view that sometimes you go into these places and weird stuff is like what he's describing has happened, and of course it starts disintegrating and the landlord's not upgrading and you have these raves and you think, man, I wonder what those people were exposed to when they were in there doing those raves.
And you know what? Unfortunately, it's a lot of kids. I mean, I was a kid once, but I was also a bodybuilder, so I didn't think about doing drugs or any of that stuff. But a lot of them they do X,
right?
And so when they're doing X, their mind's in another world. So they're not thinking. They see a gold right in front of them, ooh, pretty colors. So they're not thinking. They're not thinking about that.
But still, I'm thinking about from a more malevolent, as far as negative influence, and things like that. I'm not talking about what they see. I'm thinking about what people are susceptible to, especially when the influence of
especially
something like that.
Especially stuff that was left over after that lady cleansed that place.
Of course. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, whatever was left behind, whatever they did. Because let's face it, it's bad enough in my book to be sacrificing animals, but if they had their human body parts, whether they sacrificed it or they got it after the fact, because I know that a lot of these dark rituals, sometimes they do their human sacrifices, or sometimes they send people to rob graveyards so they can get the heads and the hands. I'm sure that has special significance. But let me ask you something. So what is it? What the Haitian mob was using these voodoo people to do?
So they're very superstitious.
Oh, okay.
They're very superstitious. If somebody even doesn't do anything, if they're in like invading their territory, okay, or they want to like ask for like a specific favor, like to bless them, or to like that they want to be invincible, mm-hmm, or they want to sell their drugs and they want to be a millionaire. It could be a number of things, but they need to have something to offer. Sometimes they'll offer one of their own enemies.
Yeah, I believe that.
The Haitian cop, he goes, man, you have no idea what my mother-in-law has seen.
Let me tell you. Okay. Right. Next, down to the next normal story. He's like, that's a tough act to follow, Henry. Okay, but I'm gonna get back to let's go to just regular old stuff here. We're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to New Orleans, okay? And this is a story, and it's 1838. All right. Well, no, I take this back. They talk about the story in 1838 New Orleans, but supposedly it had happened from before, okay? And it's told about this man called Claude Plancow, who was known as Claude Le Beau. Now, he lived in a house below Canal Street. Canal Street is one of the big avenues that they have in New Orleans, which was where everybody would parade around. It was one of the main streets from the original New Orleans. And this, of course, was during the late 1700s. And he was said to never look on a woman but to win her, and never one but to destroy. Sounds like a real nice guy. In other words, if he couldn't have her, he would destroy her. Now, after his attempts at seducing all these different women or girls in New Orleans, he would disappear from the city, probably because there was some father, uncle, brother gunning for him, wanting to have a duel with him and kill him. And it's really weird because he says he had no associates or friends, and none could tell where he came from or where he went. His only companion was an old woman who lived with him, and she was like his cook and like a housekeeper. Thing was, this old woman knew all his secrets. In other words, where the bodies were buried. Now, it was rumored that he was connected with Lafayette, which was a pirate at that time. Again, Claude appeared to be a good Catholic, and he would visit the Ursuline convent, pretending to be pious, of course, but mostly what he would do is he would go to see the French or Spanish girls that were being guarded there. Because believe it or not, it wasn't just the Casquet girls who were sent to the Ursuline convent to be like chaperoned. It was like young ladies that were sent there. Now, this is supposedly in April. He sees this beautiful girl praying. Her name is Cecile Claire. All right. And what he does is, because she goes to mass at the convent, she's not living there. What he does is he follows her home, right? Goes, sees where she lives. And the next night, she's walking on the banquette, I imagine is in that area, and 4 men in masks kidnap her. And they take her to supposedly this old woman who kept house for him. Her name was Tabine, right? Now, the girl's mother and the townspeople, they're searching for this girl, for Cecile, everywhere. They cannot find her anything. No, nobody's seen her. Nobody's heard from her. Nobody, like the earth swallowed her. 2 months go by, and Claude, oh, Jin, stop. Claude does a very stupid thing, which is he hits the old woman. He strikes her, Tabine. And what does she do? She goes and she tells police what he's done. As in regards to Cecile Claire. Now, they raid his house and they find her skeleton handcuffed in a low room in the left wing of his house, like a dark room. She had been starved to death. Now, he ends up getting hung. And believe it or not, the ghost that supposedly is seen is not the girl or him. It's the ghost of the old lady, Tabine, who's seen wandering around the streets. Because remember, this is very old. This is a house below Canal Street. Now, also, there's something really interesting, which I didn't know about, that they had these spikes called Romeo spikes or Romeo catchers that they would put on the poles that were holding up like the second floor of those balconies that they're very familiar that you see in New Orleans. They're placed on the balcony poles. And the reason for that is that the young women usually lived on the second floors of the house. This is in the French Quarter. And these spikes were used to deter the Romeos from climbing up their rooms in the middle of the night. I never knew that. You know, as far as what was the purpose of the Romeo. Now, one of the things that that I was doing research, I kept coming across the what they call a different references to something called in New Orleans the haunted house. The nobody would say the so and so's haunted house. No. It was the haunted house. All right. So I was like, wow, what could that be? So I started looking that up. And wait a minute. Let's see. Wait. Ooh. All right. And this is what I found. This haunted house, this place was so famous in New Orleans that it was called the haunted house. Okay. And it was supposedly, all right, in 1863, by then they were going to demolish it. Okay. And apparently it had a bunch of stories connected to it. It faced a square by Washington and Chiputla Street. Petula Street. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that. Somebody from New Orleans is probably going, oh my God. Okay, now Supposedly, the story was that there was a legend that there was a skeleton hidden in a corner of the wall where the grand staircase wound up, but that it wasn't that somebody was buried there, is that they were walled up alive in there, okay, as like to keep a secret and as a punishment. Now, supposedly this place, it was at one point it was used as a storehouse by pirates who would store their things there that they meant to sell to country merchants. Remember, New Orleans back then, this is very different from what you think of New Orleans now. New Orleans was very rural. You had plantations basically where there's houses now. Now what they would do is they would smuggle the goods to the bayous and the lakes, then forward it to the Mississippi River, somewhere between Algiers and Gretna, and they would keep all this merchandise that they've stolen in these houses. Now, during the time that this happened, this house back then, even then, it was a very sumptuous mansion, and it was 2 miles from the city limits. That's what I'm saying. This wasn't. Eventually, it would become New Orleans proper, but back then it was 2 miles away, and it was a very large plantation. It had all these beautiful parks and gardens, and the main entrance was bordered by a grove of orange trees. Now, the again, they nobody ever knew back then in the 1800s. First of all, its true age, uh, and some said it was one of the first brick houses constructed in Louisiana, and also that the Barataria pirates met under its roof. That was until General Andrew Jackson captured the leader, and this is in 1814. But that throughout the years, some of the best families in Louisiana lived there, but many left suddenly, and eventually it became abandoned and fell to ruin. Now, another rumor was that there was a treasure on the second floor, all right? And then there was another story that said it was buried in the grounds under the main floor of the house. Remember, again, this all stems back to the thought that this place is being used by pirates. Now, in the late 1850s, police officers from the 4th District, they hear these rumors that there's something, buried treasure, something. And what they decide is they're going to go there after dark and start looking for it. So they show up there one night with their picks and their shovels, and they start to dig. And about 4 feet down, they hit something made of wood. So the leader, which was a sergeant, he brings his lantern, goes down into the hole, and he sees that there's like what they call a wooden keg. And it's very heavy. And of course, in their head, they're thinking, oh my God, this is full of gold and jewels and whatever. So they don't even open it there. They take this thing home. And then when they open it, all it is caked gunpowder because it's damp down there. So, but they don't give up. They come back the next 2 nights, digging at the same place. But what happens is that soon that hole starts to fill with water because remember, New Orleans is below the sea level. So they give up. It starts filling in with water. So a few years later, a group of young guys, they challenge each other to spend the night inside the building. And it's a little bit after 10 p.m. So they go up to the second floor, and they hang out and they talk. And then they hear the church bell. It's midnight. And then one of them says, hey, why don't we go up to the roof? Because remember, this is a flat roofed house. Let's go up to the roof, the open roof. They go up there and they decide they're going to spend the rest of the night there. Now, about 1 a.m., all of a sudden they hear these slow steps coming up the stairways, and they can hear it creak. And then they're thinking, because they're all looking at each other as in, we're all here. Who is that? And then all of a sudden they see what they called a woman that looked like a corpse. She's dressed all in white. And that was it. Everybody runs for cover. All right. They rush the stairs and they go down. Remember, this is a winding staircase, which is one of those that goes like circles. All right. And they just, every man for himself. Okay. Everybody runs out. They jump the low fence and they're at the open street. And then all of a sudden they realize that one of the guys that was with him is not there. He's missing. And they're calling and whistling for him. Nobody's going back in there to get him, though. No reply from the guy, right? So they all leave to go home. It was like, sorry. They're worried about him, but Still, they're as worried as they are. They're too scared to go back inside. So this young guy, the one that's left behind, he finally arrives at home as dawn is breaking. So of course his friends ask him, "Hey, what happened?" And he's talking how he fell through a hole in the roof. All right. And he found himself in the attic of the house. And he stayed there all night until it was daylight. But they say that he never talked about those hours he spent alone in the narrow room. Now, not long after this, he committed suicide by taking poison. All right. And the cause, they said, when they did the inquest for the suicide, was unaccounted for. Now, supposedly, and I don't know how much of this is accurate, but this is what they reported, they had found in the debris of this house, because I guess it was falling apart, was a lady's casket. All right. This was supposedly found by the demolition workers. Now, the box, the casket it was disfigured. It was very old. And inside they find, they have a hard time opening. They open it and they don't find anything as in far as like a body or a skeleton, but they find all these old like manuscripts somebody's written down, and they have no idea who wrote it. Now, they were saying that there was the page that was found in the casket was the autobiographies of this a young woman, quote, which seemed to have written there. I'm sorry, my dog's here having a moment. That she, in other words, that she had written it while condemned to a secret death, and which she had written in her album. Come here, you guys. Come here, be quiet. There you go. There's nothing like giving authenticity to a ghost stories by having dogs bark all of a sudden. Anyway, okay, so basically, it's like they find this page in the casket of some young lady who's written this because she's been condemned to a secret death, and she, whatever. All right. Now, some wondered if the story is true. Is it just a romance? Somebody like supposedly some young ladies penned this. Now, at this time, again, nobody really knows that much history about this house. So the next day, supposedly this newspaper editor, they write the story about what they find, and they get a letter from a guy that says, "I see much talk in the papers lately about the haunted house on Washington Avenue. Much of it is incorrect. In your paper, I see that you say its age is a matter of dispute. The reason is that it's mixed up with another old house that was built a long time after. The house on Washington Avenue was built in the years 1789 and 1790 by Gilbert Lacroix, a celebrated architect. He stayed in Louisiana only 4 years, but was well known to my grandfather. I have often heard speak of him in the family when I was a boy. Signed, an old citizen." Okay. Now, around that same time, there's another newspaper who prints a story called "The Canary and the Skeleton, a Tale of the Haunted House." This is how famous this house was. And the way it says, in the summer of 47, when the saffron scourge is the yellow fever, okay, claimed a victim from almost every family in the city, a rather singular occurrence took place in the upper portion of the city. A golden-plumed canary escaped from the cage one morning, and but few attempts were made to regain it, for the bird's fond mistress was lying at the point of death. In the course of a month or so, the bird was seen on the balcony where its old cage hung, and when a servant attempted to catch it, it flew to the top of the haunted house. Day after day, the visit was renewed, and day after day, the bird took its flight in the same direction. At length, a venturesome party of young men pursued, and lo, on top of the house, they beheld a human skeleton, and inside the skeleton, the bird had made its nest and raised its young. There was a lesson of life and death. The ghastly and the beautiful met together, and the living claimed a shelter from the dead. Now, you don't know if this is true or if they were just using the backdrop of the house. You're never sure. But again, this is part of the mystique of this house. Now, in August of 1863, by the way, this is Civil War is raging. The newspaper receives another letter explaining the history of the house, and this is what it says. I have seen many different stories the last few days about the haunted house. Being an old citizen of New Orleans coming into this country 60 years ago, I can give you some details concerning the house. This fine mansion, for was one of the most magnificent structures in the country, was built before the century and was constructed for the family of Mr. Livaudace and Madame Livaudace, who now reside in Paris and still owns the property. It has never been finished. During the time that old Mr. Livaudace occupied the house, a pirate of Lafitte's gang came and sought refuge there and revealed to the proprietor the place where there was treasure hidden. He was then very sick and died shortly after, but when search was made, the treasure was not found, although a small casket containing different papers was discovered. If the workmen will dig near the old magnolia tree, they will find many skeletons there. As for the house, there are two or three vaults in its walls, one particularly in the middle room called the Labyrinth, which was a very dark place, the only light proceeding from the roof. A person desiring to secrete himself there, when once in the hiding place inside the wall, could not have been found. Having visited the house from 1800 to 1830, I am able to give you the details, and truer also than those given by a daily paper of the city. The grandson and granddaughter of Mr. Livaudace are now in the city and can vouch for these facts. At that time, the house was surrounded by orange trees and had once been one of the finest gardens of the state. Please excuse my bad English being an old Frenchman. Yours respectfully, Y.F. the R. Okay. So far, this man's story checks out. And you makes you wonder if that labyrinth that he talks about, that very dark places where that guy fell through, that young man, that he fell into that room. Because apparently this house, if you think about it, it was constructed apparently in order to have secret rooms, which is maybe why the pirates used it, or somebody that already when they constructed it had thoughts of maybe that they were going to be smuggling stuff. Who knows? Now, a few days later, the same guy, the same gentleman, sends another letter, and it's dated August 27th, 1863. And this time he says, "Dear sir, my last I omitted many things concerning the haunted house, which I now give in this letter. At the time that Livaudace's house was built, the first district was then a vast plantation belonging to old Mr. Saint Marie, where sugar canes used to grow. Then came the Livaudace plantation, and I remember very well, being then very young, that on Saturdays we were in the habit of going to hunt on Mr. Saint Marie's plantation and coming back the next day. For it was considered at that time as way out of town, with our bags full of duck, geese, etc. Even in its early days, the Livaudace house had the reputation of being nightly visited by ghosts, etc. So even as far back then, it was already considered a haunted house. I will relate to you what happened to us one night we were there, the circumstances of which I entered on a memorandum book I have always kept. It was a Saturday night in February of 1803, and we had set up playing a little game of cards until about 12 o'clock, when we heard a strange noise and somebody crying for help. Instantly we sprang to our guns and went in the direction of the river. There we found a man in a dying condition, who told us that as he was going to die, he would make a confession to us. He said he belonged to a band of pirates whose rendezvous was a mile further up. He declared that he had been stabbed a few minutes before for refusing to obey the order of his chief to go and murder the inmates of the L house, which I assume is Livaudace. 2 or 3 weeks before, he said they had murdered two planters on their way up the coast and had buried them under a big oak tree, then standing near the fountain of the park. He gave us his name as Francois Largot and his birthplace as La Rochelle, France. We took him to the house and he died there. 2 or 3 days after this, at about 11 o'clock at night, the servants came running to the house very much frightened and told us they had seen a ghost in the garden with a lantern in its hand. We went out and saw a person dressed in white garments. We cocked our guns and cried to him to stop or else he would be shot at, but he refused to stop. We then fired at him, wounding him in the leg. He declared to us that he came there to frighten the people of the house so as to rob it of all the most valuable things. We then dressed his wounds, put him to sleep, but the next morning when we awoke, the bird had flown out of his cage. In the year, which of course led you to believe, was that's a neat trick. Was the haunting the original stories of hauntings? Some guy running around pretending to be a ghost so people would stay away. Now, then it continues. In the year 1858, some young men belonging to the second district at the same you were publishing the history of the haunted house came to me as they knew that I was well acquainted with the house to accompany them on a night errand, for they were going, they said, to remain a whole night in the house and see the countess. But I could not go. One of them told me afterwards that they had gone to the middle of the stairs when a perfect shower of bricks came pouring upon them, and they all gave up the idea of sleeping in the house. Before many a day, the traveler will no more be able to pay a visit to the old mansion, now being demolished, may hear from others all the different stories concerning the haunted house of Lafayette. Pray excuse my long letter, but as I do not doubt that it will interest the public in not having to speak of it again, I remain yours, etc. Y.F. Der. Now, in January of 1864, the house is still standing, and the stories were whispered that at least 7 bad spirits had taken refuge in the minds of persons walking past the mansion. In other words, if you walk past the mansions, you were basically getting psychically attacked. Some describe being knocked down and a small crime wave of robbery perpetrated by a gang which attacked pedestrians was believed to be the pirates that once came to the house to hide their loot. When and if the brick mansion known as the haunted house was demolished remains unknown. So there you go. That's our story to finish out the Mardi Gras of 2023. And it goes to show you that a lot of these things that, it makes you wonder how much of it was true, how much of it was made up. Here we go. How much of it was real. So, anyway, for those of you who are going to do think of this as Mardi Gras as the precursor to Lent, well, this is it. The nice big hurrah. So till next year, I'll be having some other live streams. But don't forget to join us every week on Stories of the Supernatural, and also subscribe to my Live Stack newsletter, which I have all the announcements of all the new things that are going to be happening over in Stories of the Supernatural, and also with the other Nightshade Diaries and everything else. But again, thank you so much for being part of my audience, and you are all wonderful. Take care, you guys.